Are the Mets okay?
They're okay for now, I guess. It's been a rough almost 2 months now for the Mets. So I'm doing better than the Mets right now, personally, probably. When you ask me how I'm doing, the season really pivoted for them in the middle of June, and they seemed like they were right in the ship for a little bit there toward the end of July, and then they went into San Diego, got swept, came home, got swept, and have lost 8 of 9 now. So it's been just a rough go of it for a team that just hasn't shown any kind of consistency and doesn't really look like the team they were for the first 2.5 months of the year over the last 2 months.
Tim, I'm going to come out hot here, and I apologize ahead of time, but I'm going to do it anyways. Having been in that clubhouse for 2 years, and I know how this question gets brought up quite often, but there's been people saying the team has no heart. Is there any veracity to this statement, or is this just a classic? We got to ask that question every year when things aren't going well.
Yeah, I mean, I think like that comes up. I think more and more when a team struggles offensively, the way the Mets have. Like if you go out there and you lose a game 13-11, no one really questions your heart because you were in it. If you lose 2-0, if you go into a ninth inning like they did on Wednesday, being no hit by Gavin Williams, like then it really looks like you're flat, like you're not trying, like you don't have any heart. So having been covering the Mets for a while, when they've gone through different offensive slumps, that is the number one thing that fans bring up. I don't think that's an issue. I mean, this is largely the same clubhouse that showed a lot of heart in the way they came back last season over the final 4 months of the year. Francisco Lindor and Brandon Nimmo, I think have the pulse of that room pretty well at this point. Pete Alonso is a guy who's been there for a while. Jeff McNeil. These are not guys who kind of roll over when things get tough. At least not anymore the way they did maybe back in 21 when things really went south for them in August. But since then, they've shown a little bit more resolve in that regard, especially last year. So I don't think it's a heart issue. I think it's just that really no phase of the game are they playing well for 6 to 8 weeks now.
The thing that stands out to me, first of all, is that the team's pretty healthy, which is always great, right? The team's in a good spot compared to most other teams. I mean, look at the Atlanta Braves, for example, right? They're missing their whole rotation, they're missing a lot of bats, all that, right? So with the Mets, I'm wondering when you see multiple superstars struggle at the same time, if there's some approach, some strategy from teams that you're seeing frequently. Last year, what stood out to me with the Texas Rangers after they won a World Series is how teams were beating them with heaters, high heaters. They just like couldn't as a team hit them. There might have been one or two guys, but for the most part, that was the MO for the Rangers, and their offense fell apart after winning a World Series. Are you seeing any trends like that where teams are taking advantage of a weakness with the Mets?
So the two things that stand out, one, I think they're last I checked about a week ago, they were like 28th in the league against sliders. That's a tough pitch to struggle against at this level. That's a pitch you see an awful lot of. And then the other one is against left-handed pitching. We've seen this kind of across the game this year that the right-handers have not had the kind of success they're used to having against left-handed pitching. For the Mets, it's really been borne out with Francisco Lindor and Pete Alonso having pretty terrible years against lefties. The Mets lefties have been better against left-handed pitching than their righties have been. And so we've seen a lot of, the top part of the Mets order, which is, some combination of Lindor, Nimmo, Soto, and Alonso. We're seeing a lot of teams go to their lefty reliever to handle that part of the order, or have a left-handed starter go through that a third time through the order because they believe that that part of the order is more vulnerable to lefties than it should be theoretically. So I haven't looked up their exact record against lefties, but I know it's significantly worse than the record against righties. So that's been an area where they've really struggled of late, and against the sliders as well, which plays into that at the same time.
You mentioned Pete Alonso, who after coming on this 1-year deal and really putting up numbers, some of his best months ever in the first half, then went into July and had statistically, I think, if not the worst year he's ever had hitting wise, one of the worst months. So in terms of him specifically, and he is struggling with lefties, you mentioned that, but what specifically do we think is happening with him and his bat? Is he between pitches? Is he not seeing something well? What do you see out of Pete?
Yeah, I think he said this last week that kind of when he's in a slump the way he was in the month of July, you can tell at the way he chases pitches down and away. It's the slider mainly. Like he feels better if his chase is up in the zone and he's missing fastballs up. He's okay with that. He feels like he's going to get to that pitch eventually. He's going to have better discernment on it. When he's chasing the sliders, that's when he's out of whack. And we saw that in July. You're right. I think the OPS was like 548 or something like that in the month of July. A far cry from where he was in April and May in particular. And so like the Mets order is the entire team is built on that top four in the order being as good as any in baseball. And while Lindor, Alonso, and Soto have had good individual months, Nimmo has been good in stretches. There's really been no point this season where they've all clicked, and there have been a lot more points where none of them have, like most recently. So that's the part of the order that's supposed to carry the team. It's supposed to overcome the weaknesses they have elsewhere on the roster. It just has not worked out that way really at any point this season.
Well, it's okay. I mean, you just need a dose of medicine over the weekend against, oh, wait, it's the best record in baseball that they're facing, the Milwaukee Brewers, right? I just keep thinking about the Blue Jays getting a little slumpy, and then they destroy the Rockies over the last several days. The Mets will not have that luxury. They're in Milwaukee, although good times. Last time they were in Milwaukee with the wild card game 3, Pete Alonso, the big homer off Devin Williams, who's now a Yankee. Do you think a series like this can spark them in a positive end? Because they're going to be playing against the top team right now, record-wise, and just some top-level competition. I mean, the last couple series they're taking on the Guardians and the Giants, both okay teams, but the Brewers are the cream of the crop right now.
I mean, you would sure hope that if it is a motivation issue, that they'd be getting up for this series. The team they played in the playoffs last year, a team that, until that playoff series had really had their number, especially in Milwaukee, dating back like 6-7 years. I think the Mets have only won one series in Milwaukee since 2017, outside of the wild card series. So that's a place where they've really struggled historically. It's a team that has given them trouble because of the style that it plays. The Mets have been better against opposing base stealers this year than they were last year. But that is an issue for them at times. A team that puts the ball in play and challenges their defense the way Milwaukee does. So I think this is, they need to put together a good series. We saw them, when they were in that tough stretch in late June when they lost 14 of 17. It was a series win over the Brewers that got them out of it. They took 2 out of 3 at home against Milwaukee at the start of July, then took 2 out of 3 from the Yankees. That got them back into kind of a better state of play for maybe 3.5 weeks until they'd hit this most recent skid. But this is the kind of team. The National League is a gauntlet, and this is the kind of team you're going to have to play well against in the final 2 months, and then of course into October if you want to get back to where they were last year.
Well, let's hope they are able to pull some of these out and get the fire lit a little bit. Speaking of weird kind of slumpy stuff happening, especially in the lineup, Juan Soto, who is by all metrics having a Juan Soto style year, there is one big glaring split that makes no sense to me, and I am still yet to figure out what's going on, and that is his production with the bases empty versus people on base. He's has over 1,000 OPS with bases empty, and with runners off, it's a 650, which is something that's never showed up for in his career. He is actually one of the guys with the bat, I think maybe the best in the league, that doesn't have these weird splits. He's pretty much consistently against everybody all the time. So that leads me to think that, is this an intent? Is there something he's trying to do or someone he's trying to be in those situations? Have you heard anything about mindset or approach with guys on base that is different this year than maybe would have been past for Juan Soto that explain it? And if not, do you have any theories?
I haven't heard anything. No one has said anything about him individually in that respect. We've seen this has been an issue for the Mets as a unit for most of the season in terms of bases empty versus runners in scoring position. The OPS is 50 or 60 points different. That changed in July. The unfortunate thing is it changed because they stopped hitting with nobody on. But like they've talked about, when it starts to become an issue for a team, you press a little bit. So I can imagine when this shows up as a weird split for Soto through April in his first season with the Mets, you can imagine him maybe pressing in those spots a little bit more. He's not the type of guy who would admit that, and I don't think anyone on the Mets would admit that on his behalf. But it's funny because before the season, I was looking at who had the best debut season as a Met in history. And you look at like Mike Piazza's numbers in 1998. He was incredible for them for the most part. But I had remembered watching that season and thinking vaguely that he had a bad year. And it was because he had very similar splits to this. It was kind of no one on base versus runners in scoring position. So the thought was like, well, Piazza's getting his numbers when it doesn't matter. And Soto's getting his numbers when it doesn't matter. He's not coming through in the big spots. I think these are the kinds of things that even out over time. It is kind of just a weird split for now. I'm surprised it has lasted even this long. But I can imagine it snowballing just a little bit on him. But he's the type of guy who, once he gets out of it a little bit, I think will start to go in the other direction.
Kratz, there are a lot of people out there that pay rent and they don't get anything for it.
Might as well change that. You can get some rewards for flights, hotels, tons of stuff.
With Built, you can earn flexible points that can be redeemed towards airlines, hotels, a future rent payment, your next Lyft ride, and much more. It doesn't stop there. Built is about making your entire neighborhood more rewarding. You can dine out at your favorite local restaurants and enjoy experiences just for Built members every month. They're turning a monthly expense into an opportunity to earn rewards and discover the best that your neighborhood has to offer. Your rent is finally working for you. Earn points on rent and around your neighborhood, wherever you call home, by going to joinbuilt.com/foul. That's joinbilt.com/FOUL. Make sure to use our URL so they know we sent you. Joinbuilt.com/foul. Go for it. Tim, where do you stand on the hitting coach conversation? I tend to think that some can make a massive difference. Others are definitely not as good as at their craft, right? And then most of them are in the middle, where it depends on personnel, the players that you're connecting with, etc. This team has a lot of superstars. They've been in the league for a while. They know what they're doing. But I'm sure there's a little heat. New York fans, Mets fans, they want to come after someone, and Eric Chavez is the hitting coach. He was a great big leaguer, but he's the hitting coach with the Mets right now, and that's the one who's being asked about. So what is your thought on that topic?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you ever want to make a change with your hitting coaches, you have to know what you want to do instead. I go back, the Mets in 2021 fired Chili Davis and Tom Slater as their hitting coaches, I think on like May 2nd. It was as early as any team had fired their hitting coaches. They wanted to get more analytical. And it kind of they brought in Hugh Quattlebaum to run things. Hugh Quattlebaum. And it kind of overwhelmed their hitters for the rest of the season. It was difficult for them to make that adjustment on the fly. And so, bringing in a different hitting coach in the middle of the season, it's kind of like bringing in a different catcher. He's got to learn everything on the run, and it becomes difficult. You see, I remember looking at the numbers of how much teams improve, and they do a little bit when you fire a hitting coach, bring in someone else, but that's generally explained more by regression. So I think if the Mets wanted to make a move with Chavez, with Jeremy Barnes, they're the co-hitting coaches. They've both been there for 4 years. They know those hitters pretty well at this point. They bring different approaches. Barnes is more the analytical and mechanical guy. Chavez is more of the experience and mental guy. They work with different hitters differently. I think if you wanted to make a change there, if you're David Stearns, who I don't believe has fired a coach midseason in his tenure as a general manager or a president of baseball operations, then you've got to know this is the guy I'm bringing in, or these are the guys I'm bringing in, and this is what we're going to do differently. You've got to have a really set plan rather than just firing someone to fire someone.
Having been in that clubhouse when Hugh came on, confusion is the correct word. I can confirm that is definitely what was happening. Big picture, we're looking at positive trends. We want to turn things around. We want the team to put themselves in better positions to score more runs and win. What are a couple things you would like to see as the lineup kind of unveils through a game that maybe even if the results aren't quite there, we're seeing better at bats? What types of things would you look for to see that trend maybe moving in the better direction, some early signs?
Yeah, I mean, I think they've got to stop having these like 3, 4, 5 inning, or as they did earlier, it was like 14 inning stretches where they're going hitless. They're having too many 1, 2, 3 innings against opposing staffs. So getting guys on base, just creating the opportunities that they were creating in April, May, and the first half of June, and then coming through with runners in scoring position in a way they weren't at that point. And they started doing in July just with fewer opportunities. So I think kind of meshing those two aspects, hitting with nobody on, hitting with runners on, the way we've talked about. And then I do think we focused a lot on the offense. Like the starting pitching staff has to lead the way as well. That they were first in rotation ERA in the National League through June 12th. I think June 13th is kind of when this shifted for them, when they blew a 5-run lead and lost to the Rays. And since then, they're 29th in baseball in rotation ERA. So it's been a real shift for them. The whole staff ERA has been worse. But leading from the rotation, guys kind of beyond David Peterson and now Sean Manaea is back, pitching into the 6th inning and beyond. Kodai Senga looking like he did earlier in the season could help, to the point where it's not a 2-0 game in the 6th inning every night, or where they need to score 7 runs to win a game. I think having a starter go out there and win you a game the way like Gavin Williams did against them on Wednesday could help start them in the other direction, get that rock moving the opposite way.
I'll stay on the rotation. a guy that our show has had consensus on over the past couple years, and this is what we do on shows. Frankie Montas. AJ will put it more bluntly usually than I will. How is this guy getting contracts like this? I mean, he signed for 2 years, 34 mil. There's certain pitchers in the offseason where you're like, man, this guy can't find a home. And it's 2 years, 34 mil, I think, with a player option for next year. So he could opt out if he was really good. He's not opting out, newsflash. But what's going on with Frankie Montas? What's the plan with him? And has the organization talked about, what they're seeing, from him now that is leading to the struggles, what they liked about him that led to the signing in the offseason? Of course, he's had a lot of injury issues. That was the case this year. He comes back, but he's not pitching well.
Yeah, and so in the offseason, they liked his stuff. They thought like what he did over the final 2 months with Milwaukee last year when he brought his velocity back up was kind of him coming off of the shoulder injury that he had with the Yankees. This was the kind of the in-between year he needed, and he was going to take off the following season. That's why they made the gamble on him with the 2-year deal, including the player option for the salary that they did, which I do think surprised a lot of people in the industry. What's been off, really, he had the injury in spring training. Didn't come back into the rotation until June. While he was even on his rehab assignment, he was getting hit hard. It's been like a mechanical issue that he's been working through for most of that time, just to be more repeatable and to put the ball where he wants to. It doesn't matter how good your stuff is if you can't put it where you want to enough of the time, and that's been carried over for a while. So they've talked about maybe using an opener in front of him. Paul Blackburn is about ready to come back from his own injury. He would be another option. Most Mets fans roll their eyes at that possibility and look more longingly at AAA, where you've got Brandon Sproat and Nolan McLean, two of their best pitching prospects, who appear just about ready to come to the big league level. Sproat, after a tough first couple months, has really looked good of late. McLean's been pretty consistent all season long. And David Stearns has been open to that idea throughout this season. So it would not surprise me if we saw one of those two before long in the major leagues. But Montas, I think is probably pitching for his spot in the rotation the next start or two here, where the team needs him to pitch well. That they're not in such a good spot in the standings anymore, where they can afford the luxury of letting their fifth starter go out there and wear it every fifth day. They need something out of that spot, and they need it soon.
That's why it's crazy to me, because if he can't kick it as a starter, I don't know if he's the reliever type. And then if that's not the case, still on the hook for another season. I mean, I guess you can phantom IL him, but Mets got a little light punishment for that in the past, so we'll see. That's why I'm following this one closely, Tim. We'll keep an eye on it. Last one here, real quick on that. Like, if it doesn't work out for him in the rotation, I mean, they can't really do much with him. I don't think you can option him without his permission, right? So
Right.
They would have to put him on waivers.
So yeah. I mean, like the options would go. You send him to the bullpen, which is something they were contemplating when his rehab assignment was going as poorly as it was before they had some injuries in their rotation that opened up a spot for him. You can send him to the bullpen as kind of the eighth guy there and the long guy that would push. Blackburn is kind of the guy who's slated for that role when he does come back. But they could move on from him as well. He has not pitched well this year either. If you decide that you don't have room for him on the major league roster, it's exposing him to waivers, it's DFAing him, it's potentially releasing him and eating what's left on that contract, including next year. So that would be a costly move to make, but one that the Mets could afford in a way that most other teams cannot, and that is one of the luxuries they have still.